everybody is here again, so we'll go ahead and reconvene into session. So we finished last, we had completed the Register of Deeds department, so we are now on to planning, which means we basically have 4 more departmental reviews to go over. Once we're complete with that, then we'll move into the amendments that we have so far. I believe we're up to 7 so far. At this point, there may be 1 or 2 more still yet to come, but I believe there's been 7 that so far are distributed. So once we're done with these 4 departments, we'll plan to move into those amendments. So next department is the planning department.
The chart of personnel for planning and zoning is on page 475. They're budgeted for 14 full-time employees for 2019, the same as in 2018. The summary of significant changes is on page 477. And the planning and zoning department's levy is actually decreasing from $778,000 to $775,000.
So any questions or comments in regards to the planning department? This includes property lister and land records modernization. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next department, and that would be land and water conservation.
The chart of personnel for land and water conservation is on page 500. They're budgeted for 7 full-time employees for 2019, the same as 2018. The summary of significant changes is on page 501. And that tax levy is moving from $528,000 to $564,000.
Okay, we'll open it up for any questions or comments in regards to the land and water conservation budget. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next department, which is the county board department and the scholarship program.
The start of the county board budget is on page 509. There's no county employees as part of the county board budget. However, there's the elected officials that make up the county board. And there's also the scholarship fund, and the list of significant items is on page 512. The county board's levy is moving from $293,000 in 2018 to $310,000 in 2019.
Opening up for questions and comments, I'll call on Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is about the scholarship. I'm not suggesting that we hand over a scholarship to somebody, to a student in a school.
Supervisor Warnicki? Okay, thank you.
To a student who's written a poor essay, but when one school's getting 3 or 4 scholarships and there are other schools getting none, either we're not promoting this enough so that all the schools are participating fully, or I just think there's something wrong with that situation. There could be 2 really good essays in one school, but when it gets to be more than that and there's other schools getting nothing, I'd like us to rethink that somehow. I don't know if there needs to still be a committee, if there's a committee on the scholarships or how that's worked, but it has concerned me. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker is Supervisor Wojciechowski, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple questions. So in the county board expenses, I'm assuming you're the one who puts it together, correct?
Yes, I put it together along with working with the finance director and also working with the county executive.
In your budget, are you the one who, is this part of the budget that includes the cost for iPads, like when we originally got them? Is this in the county board section of the budget?
That was, yes.
Did you budget for any replacements in this budget? And if so, where would that be on here? What line item? Would that be under technology?
Right, if I remember correctly, we budgeted for 2 or 3 in case there was damage to them. And that would have been in that line. So
so that would be 53522?
Correct.
Okay, so, and I see that 4,500 is what is being proposed right now, and how many would that be for? Do we know?
Patty Francoeur gave us an estimate for how much each one of those was. I can get the answer for you, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay. I only bring that up because being on the IS committee, we've talked a lot about the lifespan of iPads, and I'm trying to remember, I wasn't here when we got them originally. It looks like it might have been 2015 because there's a lot, or no, I'm looking at the wrong one. Maybe someone could tell me when they got them, but we've been talking about how, you know, the lifespan of these iPads isn't that long, and that raises a few concerns with security, software, you know, not updating software, and that presents security issues. It also presents, you know, a fiscal kind of dilemma, whereas are we going to implement a program or a policy where we're going to do it, you know, on a rolling basis? So every year we do a third of them, we replace them, as opposed to waiting to replace them all at once. And I personally think that we should budget more money to have some on hand. Not saying we have to buy them immediately, but just having that money for the reasons that I stated. And I hope that some other members from my committee will speak on that. I think it's an important issue, and I would like to see, I'm looking towards submitting a amendment to the budget to hopefully add some more just to cover those expenses. So that's all I have to say.
So what you're bringing up is accurate from what Director Francoeur was discussing with us. She had told us that you are all were considering how you would go about purchasing these in the future, determining the appropriate lifespan, and just like you said, cycling out similar to police vehicles. But because there wasn't a determination yet at this point, we wanted to put in a certain number in the budget just in case some were damaged to cover for those over the next year. But you're absolutely correct. Your understanding is our understanding as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Lenz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to share with the newer members that I had occasion to look back at the budget for 10 years ago, and in the year 2008, for the county government, for the chairman, for the county board, the expenses were just the same as they are today, 300 and less than $350,000. So I think it behooves the board to give kudos to management because it's costing the same. In fact, I think maybe we had 2 more supervisors on the board back then, but that's still a phenomenal record for keeping expenses under control, and you guys are doing it.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Lenz, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to add on that we're budgeting right now, so we have some iPads for replacement. But one of the realities that we're going to run into when having technology like this, just like folks, there's smartphones for those who have them. By design, Apple, Microsoft, they have kind of a time frame that they want everybody to upgrade on there, and they will only support their operating systems for so long. Once you buy into the technology, they kind of hold you hostage in regards to not updating operating systems on certain versions of certain software or certain hardware, which then opens up a can of worms in regards to susceptibility from a security standpoint. Old, unupdated operating systems are at higher risk than the maintained ones. So on future budgets, we are going to have to put together a plan on the IS committee to cycle through these so that we don't get into a situation where we have hardware sitting here on operating systems that are no longer supported by the manufacturer, therefore putting us susceptible for whatever people happen to have on their devices from being hacked and whatnot.
Thank you, Supervisor Lenz. Next speaker is Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that topic, what is the cost of an iPad? Am I reading this correctly on, let me get to the right one, 53,522, is that the correct one?
And that can be other, other equipment besides the iPads, you know, the software to go with it and so forth.
Oh, wouldn't that be under technology, small equipment technology?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that's the line you were pointing out. What line are you pointing out?
53,522,
Small equipment.
that's $4,500. Requested was
That's right, that's right.
95, the county exec cut it to 45.
Right.
That is for,
And that would be for iPads and just overall small equipment, which we didn't specifically say exactly what it was going to be for, but we cut it in half from what it's been the last couple of years in the budget.
Okay,
Because
go
if you
back.
look at the spend, we haven't had that spend.
goes back to my question on what they're referring to, you know, and I understand that they need to be replaced, and the question about doing it all at once or
Right.
so many a year is quite appropriate. But how many does $4,500, how many iPads does that buy? I mean, I don't know how much we're talking per iPad here.
I will have that answer shortly. I mean, I did write Patty right now, and I apologize that I don't know that offhand.
Oh, okay, well, I mean, I think we should answer that primary question and then go from there a little bit.
Yes.
My iPhone, I just saw it cost $329. The base model iPad is $329 with 132 gigs of storage and Wi-Fi.
But please keep in mind, that's before she puts any software on it, so that's where it really brings up. And the best of my knowledge is Patty has talked about, there has never been a policy for the iPads. They handed them all out to you. We don't know when we're supposed to replace them, what happens when someone breaks one, we just have to give them a new one. There's no policy behind it, and I really feel that her committee needs to get a policy in place because it's kind of a free-for-all right now on that.
I think I understand that, and I would support that focus, but, I mean, if we got, example, 36 iPads,
Yeah.
you want to replace 10 a year, then we would appropriate the money at the cost per unit to
Right.
do that. And that's what's missing here. You got a number in here with no cost per unit.
Correct, and we had just had cut that in half, and and that is also not just for iPads, it could be for any other equipment they need up here or so forth for the county board,
Okay.
for small equipment, so it's not just all-inclusive of the iPads.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Supervisor Farr. Next speaker, Supervisor Snyder, followed by Supervisor Brun.
I actually just yelled, so you can cancel me.
Very good, thank you. Next speaker, Supervisor Brun, followed by Supervisor Wojciechowski.
I also had the price of an iPad, I Googled it.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Supervisor Wojciechowski, followed by Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to give some clarification to Supervisor Farr, and I'm basically on the same page, whereas just based off, the reason why I bring this up is because based off the conversations we had at the IS committee, and I will say we are working right now to develop a policy. That's one of the big things we're working on right now for county electronic devices and policies behind that and such. But just based off the conversations we had, it had seemed like only a few were being budgeted for, and we wanted to make sure that if only 2 or 3 were being budgeted for, that we would include some more. But I would like to know how much each individual one costs plus the software, so I can make a accurate, estimate when submitting the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. And we're working to get a little more accurate
Yeah.
information from Patty Franklin. Next speaker is Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question for you or for Finance Department. On other operating supplies, it went from 500 up to 1,500. No large amount, but it's triple, and I'm just wondering what that entails. The number is 535533.
If I recall I think that was based on the year-to-date in that category. And so
Yes.
versus last year's budgeted, we also looked at year-to-date to determine how we would set the budget for this year. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the finance director is trying to get that
Yep.
to verify.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? once we get the answer that he's looking for, we'll certainly give you that answer as well. But seeing no other questions in the county board and scholarship, we'll move on to solid waste. And like I said, once we get these answers, we'll certainly provide them to you. So moving on down to the solid waste department budget.
Solid Waste has its own tab near the end of the budget, and the chart of employment is on page 561. They have 16 full-time employees, the same as last year. And the summary of significant changes, I'm not sure they have one. Well, I'll just go on to point out that solid waste is not supported by the tax levy. It's supported entirely by revenues from tipping fees they charge companies and municipalities to deposit their garbage and recyclables, and then typically the municipalities get a rebate from any profits made on the recyclables, although the current environment is very tough for recyclable sales. John Robbie is in the back of the room and can take any questions you have.
Any questions and comments in regards to solid waste budget? I'll call on first Supervisor Fari and then Supervisor Keller. Supervisor Fari?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an opportune time to ask a question of the director here of the department. We've been notified, town of Inland and all the other towns, that the cost per ton for recycling is doubling. And of course, we have to pass that cost on to the residents of the town through an increase in, I believe that's a special assessment. Can you tell us, and me and the body, why that cost is doubling? It was $5 a ton, I think it's going to 10, right? What's behind all that?
Really what's behind it is China National Sword. China has implemented a new policy on contamination that is allowed in recyclables, and it's had a ripple effect over the last year and a half throughout all commodities, but specifically on the paper side of things. 60% of what we recycle is paper products. There's some products that a year ago were selling on the commodity markets for $60 to $70 a ton, and now they're selling for $0 a ton. So we've had a huge impact in our commodity sales that has warranted this increase in the recycling fee. Since we installed the single-stream recycling plant back in 2009, we've been able to hold those fees steady at $5 a ton for many years. And now, just with the change in the markets, it's just going in the opposite direction, so we had to make the hard choice of raising the fee. Now, I will say that, going from $5 to $10 a ton, yeah, it's doubling the fee. But just to make an example, our current commercial recycling tonnages that come into our facility, we adjust that rate monthly. And right now, for October, the monthly rate was $35 a ton charge. Whereas our municipalities, they're still bringing us the material and we're charging $5 a ton. So it was a balance, and I guess we're hoping that's as high as we need to go with it, to be honest. So.
Follow-up question, if I might, then. And I heard this before in regard to the China issue, because that was on a television program I was watching. But that begs the question then, nobody's buying the recyclables, there's no demand for that. So what are you doing with all these bales of plastic and paper? You're going to burn them, or how are you going to get rid of them?
It's not that nobody's buying them, it's just, it's kind of had a change in who is buying them.
Okay.
We're fortunate being in the Fox Valley here is we have outlets for the paper. But what market conditions nationwide have driven the prices down. We're still able to recycle all the materials that we collect. The only material that is not being fully recycled is the glass component. There is a portion of that is used for alternate daily cover in the landfill, but all the plastic, paper, aluminum, steel, that's all being recycled.
Well, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Keller, followed by Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a clarification on that recycling fee. As Supervisor Fari indicated, the price for recycling was going from $5 to $10 per ton. On page 561, this says $10 per ton increase, which is correct.
It's a $5 per ton increase. That must be a typo in the book. It's going from $5 a ton to $10 a ton.
Yeah, see, because this says it's a planned increase, $10 per ton. So I just wanted that clarified. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you Supervisor Keller. Next speaker is Supervisor Egan, Vice Chairman Egan, followed by Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question, pretty much the same thing, because it does say a $10 increase, with an increase of $127,100
Right.
because of the $10 increase. And mine was the same thing, and then you're also going to have a $25,000 due to a planned increase in disposal tonnage. So evidently you plan on making money off everyone there, even though you can't sell your product or whatever. But then I see you've still got millions of dollars in your account there, which I know you're going to say, well, we got to have that. But then at the same time, what did you do when you let the Ken Roble Park go to the parks? Who's taking care of that? I've got like 3 questions right there, all into one.
Well, you're correct. On the highlights page, that is a typo. It was proposed at 10. It was, the Solid Waste Board brought it down to $5 increase. So it's a $5 increase from $5 to $10 a ton. So it affects the dollar amount as well. It's only a, if you subtract 60,000 off that amount, that would be the correct number. Recycling, or I guess other county departments have proposed higher amounts of material to bring to us. So based on our corresponding tipping fee, that amounts to a $25,000 increase, so, in the landfill fees, interfund. And what was your last question? I'm
My
sorry.
last question about is the Ken Roble Park. Have you relinquished that part of your disposal now, and now it's all county parks underneath them?
For the
And I-
most part, the maintenance. Basically, at the dedication event, I turned the keys over to the Parks Director, Rob Way, and after that point, his staff has been maintaining the park itself. We have added some new signage that we've continued to fund, and the project still needs to be closed out, and we'll continue to fund the overall cost of the project, but the maintenance component is going to parks. But as we had previously discussed, is we'll see how the numbers work out and maybe have to assist parks with a transition of those maintenance expenses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker is Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Singstack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a quick question. The county executive used the term tipping fees. I don't know what a tipping fee is. What is that?
A tipping fee is a fee charged for dumping a garbage truck of garbage or of recyclables. And it's called a tipping fee because the trucks tip up to dump the refuse.
And so who are we charging for those trucks?
Either the companies or the municipalities that are bringing the refuse to us.
Oh,
That's correct.
okay.
And that's the primary or maybe the sole source of funding for solid waste. They are not supported by tax levy.
Okay.
Thank you Supervisor Powers. Next speaker is Supervisor Singstock, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We got rid of the Huber building, which was a county liability. I was hoping that the remaining land would turn into a county asset. So got a couple of questions regarding that Huber building land. Who's responsible for it? Have we tried to sell it, either to solid waste or to the general public? And who's maintaining that land?
Solid Waste has been maintaining the land since the Huber facility has been raised. And we put together a resolution a year ago to essentially purchase the rights of that property back from facilities for an inflated cost of what it was back in 1994. And that did not move forward, and so we're still under discussion. So,
Well, then, next question, how long are we going to set on that? Why doesn't somebody make something happen?
I don't know if Mike can speak on it, but the last I saw in the minutes from Facility and Property Management, there was a request to have a certified survey and an appraisal done on the property, that the amount solid waste was offering was not enough. So that's kind of where it's at.
I
Probably-
appreciate,
Probably something that Executive Harris and Mike Elder, the Facilities Director, and I need to talk about a little bit more.
Thank you Supervisor Singstack. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Gordon.
It was my intent to clarify that $10 a ton expense, which the Solid Waste Board reduced to $5 a ton for recycling. Director Robbie had explained that. But the other question, or the other additional goings-on at the Solid Waste Board is that there is a line in the retained earnings listing that is designed to offset and hedge too steep a reduction or expense of loss of earnings on recyclables. Am I correct?
You are correct. One of the bits of work the Solid Waste Board did at the last meeting was to, and this was something that was discussed in the budget process, of adding a line item to our retained earnings to soften tipping fee increases for these recyclables. So we set aside $500,000 to help offset some of those increases and hopefully not have to pass them on to the municipalities. So you're correct, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Gordon, followed by Supervisor Albrecht.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My microphone's broken, sorry. Sean, I noticed that the power sales has decreased 300,000. Is that due to a decrease in the flow of gas, or the power companies not wanting to buy as much?
That is purely based on the flow of gas. We're seeing decreases annually, and just based on our projections 18 months out where we thought we could be. So we're dropping it from 2.1 million to 1.8 million
Okay.
for 2019.
So I guess my question for all of us is, if, because we're using some of that power and waste heat for the highway department and for the jail, are we planning for the future when this gas does run out that we won't have that power available?
The landfill gas, there is some landfill gas being direct used at the highway shop to offset some of the heating costs. And the waste heat system at the sheriff's office has had some issues recently, and we're working to kind of fix the issues to, again, be able to fully utilize the waste heat in the sheriff's office.
Okay. Thank you.
So,
Thank you Supervisor Gordon. Next speaker is Supervisor Albrecht, followed by Supervisor Warnke.
I just wanted to comment that Winnebago County has the most reasonable tipping fees in the state of Wisconsin.
Thank you for that comment. Next speaker is Supervisor Warnke, followed by Supervisor Powers.
Three o'clock, and the gates were closed, and you closed them at 3 o'clock. And I'm asking if there's a possibility that you could somehow rearrange these hours to stay open, because, you know, there's an awful lot of people who are still working at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't, but there's a lot of people who do. And I'm sure there's a lot more people who are disappointed, especially if they have to drive a long distance to go to the salvage yard. So couldn't you sort of rotate some of your employees have them come in later and stay open later, possibly until 4 or 5?
The hours of the landfill have been 7 to 3 for a long period of time, but we're also open from 7 to noon on every Saturday. So I guess we feel at this point in time, the Saturday hours, which are adequate to handle the Monday through Friday working folk. So at this point, we don't have any plans to change the hours.
Okay.
Thank you Supervisor Warnke. And just following up what Supervisor Albrecht said, so indeed, we have the lowest tipping fees of all.
Yeah, I think our arrangement with Brown, Outagamie, and obviously Winnebago County, running one regional landfill at a time, has really helped keep tipping fees for waste and very low in this part of the state. If you go down to the southeastern Wisconsin or Madison area, the tipping fees are typically 20% higher than what we're seeing in the valley here. So,
Well, that's a credit to you all in the department, so, I mean, well done.
Yep, thank you.
And a good point. I see one other call in, Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like the county board to know how hard John and Kurt work to keep our rates low for our people. I mean, like you just said, we're one of the lowest in the state. And that's because they do their homework and they do whatever they can do to help Winnebago County. And so I give them kudos for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Seeing no other call-ins, that will conclude the Solid Waste Department budget. Thank you, Director Robbie.
Thank you.
So that actually completes our departmental budget reviews. We do have a follow-up from the Finance Director.
For the county board budget, when we were talking about small equipment, which it really should be small equipment technology, so I'll change the line item. It is $358 per standard iPad and a $10 subscription fee for each one. So $368. So that would give us about 12 or 1/3 of the board's iPads. So if we could, that would get us on a 3-year rotation, at least starting. Yes?
So in this budget, just for clarification, it is budgeted for then, that money's in there?
$4,500 is in there,
That
so
would be
it's for
enough.
iPads and could be for other small equipment.
Okay, I just
They
want to
would
make
be-
sure, because I know there is other small equipment, so I just want to double check.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's a majority. Okay, and then the second question was about other operating expenses on page 515, and that's account number 53553. And what that is as Chairman Ramos was correct, that we are looking at about $1,100 right now year-to-date on that. And what that account entitles is our nameplates, our awards through Miller Clock, when someone retires and so forth. And with the board starting to turn over, we thought it might just be a good thing to keep it about the rate that we're spending this year. So that's what that entails.
Thank you for those clarifications.
Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes our budget, departmental budget review. So now we move to the amendments. So far, there have been 7 of them that have been submitted, and you all should have a copy of all 7 of those. Is that? And our understanding is there are 4 more coming. So the process would be that we would go through all 11 of these amendments. There could potentially be another one. Someone could submit one even while we're doing the amendments. That's always possible. But we'll go through these amendments one by one, vote them up or down. Once we've completed the review of all those amendments, then we do an official vote on the budget as amended. Okay? So you all should have a summary sheet of the amendments, and then you should actually have the verbiage of the amendments in front of you. So starting with Amendment 1, that would be to add $6,007 to the 2019 coroner's office budget for the purpose of increasing the administrative associate's hours from 28 to 30 hours per week. I'll call on Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move approval of this Amendment 1. I think it's a reasonable amendment. With our opioid crisis and our suicide prevention programs, $6,000 seems a small price to pay to help people in crisis situations.
Thank you, Supervisor Wing. So there's a motion and a second. Other discussion? I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree that the 6,000 is a cheap amount for helping that. My question is, I'm having a hard time figuring out why these programs are in conjunction with the health department, and it seems like these things should be under the health department. The coroner's office deals with death, the health department deals with keeping us alive. So the 2 hours makes that position, it kicks in the benefits, correct? Which is why it's 6,000. So, and I also believe I read that there's a grant from the health department towards this. So if the grant is from the health department, it's dealing with health, and the health department has 45 employees, that 2 hours a week somehow can't get done through the health department? Can somebody answer that?
I see Director Gearin in the back, and he has a response to that question. So I'll call on Director Gearin.
Thanks for the question. So the work from the coroner's office for overdose fatality review and child death review team is critical because we receive all of the information through the coroner's office about what cases we're going to review in those meetings. So it's important to have somebody in the coroner's office that has that access to that information to be able to supply that to the health department for running those reviews, and then also for participation in those meetings to present the information that the coroner's office has.
So the 2 hours a week is to accumulate the information that you need, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so when I talked with Barry, the coroner, he was just looking for some assistance with the additional hours because it is in addition to a regular workload.
Okay, because we've gotten a bunch of letters from people from the health department talking about the cooperation and such, and that's very good, of course. But if there's all this back and forth for all these different programs, I still find it hard to believe that a program for keeping people alive isn't being done by the health department. So why that 2 hours can't somehow get absorbed in there?
Yep, the health department employees don't have access to the information that the coroner's office has, and nor do we have the ability to answer questions related to the coroner's investigation that occurs at a death in the health department. So we really need the coroner's support. The 2 hours is probably less than what they actually spend. When Barry contacted me, I said that we had a grant and that we're happy to try to help support the work of the coroner's office in helping these reviews be successful.
Okay, because the budget already hasn't increased. Didn't it go from 25 to 29? 28 rather, yes, 25. So it already was raised up 3 and they want 2 more, is that, which now kicks it into the benefit package.
And Kimberly Mackey from the coroner's office is in the back that can respond.
I can speak to some of that as well. Yes, it is. The information that they're gathering does indeed come from our office. There you go. The information that they are gathering does indeed come from our office. And a prime example, actually, for one of the committees, well, I've got someone coming in tomorrow for child death review and then overdose fatality review. I just scheduled another girl to come in, and she even said in her email to me, I think I need 2 hours with you. And I said, that's fine, we can go over that. There's a lot of information that they gather that is exactly what we're trying to do. Where are we missing certain demographics? Where are we missing when it comes to suicides on the children's side of things? We've had way too many of them this year. So we're digging deeper to see where are we missing it. Is it something the schools need to be aware of? Is there further testing we need to be doing? So we're really kind of digging in. It does take time. On the other side of that, the other thing that I have to control is identification. I can't release too much information because we have to protect the identities of those that are deceased. So there's a fine balance there with giving the health department what they need, because quite honestly, some of their data gatherers would love to have everything. So I have to limit that. I have to watch what is being released from our office and for what purposes. So unfortunately, it does take time, which I am willing to give. I don't mind participating in any of the programs that I'm in, and I actually appreciate being a part of it because I get to see, like with Child Death Review, I've seen the positives that we've gained from that and the things that have happened. So just like I said earlier, I'm hoping that I can gain that from Overdose Fatality Review and the suicide prevention that we're into.
Okay,
If that helps to answer.
I'm not questioning the programs or the need for that or anything, I'm just questioning
No.
the process, so.
Correct, correct.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker is Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that same topic, we keep referring to a grant, so how much is the grant?
I believe it's about $2,000.
So, yeah, the total grant that we have from Department of Justice to run the overdose fatality review for this next year is $25,000. Most of that goes to a consultant. We reserved some funds for our staff time, but relinquished those to the coroner's office for their support.
Well, you said 25,000? And most of it's going to a consultant?
Yep, so
What is a consultant doing?
The consultant pulls together all the partners. I mean, there are, over 40 partners that come together. We're talking all the police departments, all the EMS agencies, within the county, and then other departments that may have had some sort of contact with the individual. So it's not uncommon for 40-plus people to be at these meetings. She coordinates which deaths are going to be reviewed, puts the requests out for all of that information, assembles a baseline for discussion, does analysis of the results, reports everything back out. So there's a significant amount of work that has to occur for these meetings to take place.
Well, the question I have is if you got this grant for 25 grand and you're not, why can't you spend 6,000 plus to pay for this difference in wages? Why can't that come from the grant?
If we plan ahead, maybe we can pull more out of the grant, but we only had 2,000 left out of the grant for this next year that hadn't been allocated to a consultant that was available to give to the coroner's office. It was a request that was made. We had the 2,000 still available that we could transfer, and that's what we volunteered.
So you only need 4?
Correct. Correct.
The resolution requests 6.
Well, the resolution says 6, and then I believe, okay.
The resolution, we still are adding $6,000 of expenses, but getting $2,000 of the revenue from public health, and then the rest would be the 4,000.
4 grand?
Yes.
So the total's 10?
No. No, we're going to have 6,000 in expenditures, but then 2,000 of it is already in revenue for public health that we're just going to transfer over. So then it will net to the 4,000? Does that make sense?
No,
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah,
help
we
me
could
out.
change, we
Somebody
could
else.
change that to 4,007 and we're thinking about it.
So in a nutshell, they need $6,007 total. There's already grant funding for 2,000 to be applied to that
So you
6,000.
need 4 from the county board.
Exactly.
Correct.
4,007 is the remainder.
Okay, this is requesting 6,007.
We need to change that to 4,000,
it needs to be-
because that's all that we are going to reduce the
Okay.
general fund by.
This was sponsored by Mr. Wingren. Are you requesting that change?
Coroner isn't here to answer these questions. Where is the coroner, by the way? I mean, they had a whole year to know when these budget hearings are. Where is the coroner? I think the board needs to know that.
Well, he did say that he had
Answer the
made,
question, please. Where is the coroner?
he is in Hawaii. He had made those arrangements way back.
Okay. So, there's a need for clarification in terms of the actual amendment. So the number would actually be 4,007 for the amendment. Is that okay with with Supervisor Wingen? That is okay. Okay, yeah.
I think the council has clarified it, and it's found in, be it therefore resolved, or be it further resolved.
Yeah.
If you read that, I think it explains it better, and I appreciate your bringing it to my attention. So that would mean the resolution is correct. They're simply adding $6,000 to the coroner's budget, but 2,000 of that 6 is being transferred from the grant. The other 4 is going to come out of the fund balance, I assume.
Yep.
Would that be correct?
Yes, actually, as I'm reading now, it's correct, because the title actually simply says add 6,007 to the 2010 coroner's office budget.
Yeah.
So you're adding that expense, but it's offset by the 2,000.
Right. So the extra increase in funding is $4,000.
Correct. Okay. We have one other call-in, Supervisor Singstock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vicki, will you refresh my memory, please? At the P&F meeting, didn't we just make an adjustment on his hours?
We approved a budget transfer for 2018's labor, so this is 2019.
Yeah, I realize that.
Right, and so, yes.
So we're going up in steps.
Well, this year, for 2018.
It's the old game, get the horse in the middle of the stream, then you can't turn around.
Well, 2018 is getting it to where we're asking it to go now because she is averaging 30 hours a week. And so our budget transfer there got us to the 30 hours a week. But the 2019 budget only reflected her hours going to 28 hours versus the 30. So it would really even it out to the budget transfer we just approved last month at the board meeting for 2018.
We had talked about this now the cows come home. I guarantee you a year from now, he's going to come in over budget like he has for the last 5 years. But one thing that I don't understand regarding the coroner and to some degree the health department. We always get our staff involved in different grants. We get them involved in these, I lost it, what the terminology is now, pilot programs, which I understand the coroner is going to be involved in 2 or 3 pilot programs. On the side of our mouths, we're saying we need more money because the people are overworked, and yet we go around and get involved in all this other stuff, and we take on responsibilities of other hospitals and all this kind of stuff. That don't make sense to me.
Thank you, Supervisor Singstock. Next speaker is Supervisor Warnke.
You know, every year, I've been here a few years, and every year, and anything comes up with the coroner's office, there's always a big battle going on. So the coroner's on vacation. So what? He earned that vacation, and that's the way it goes. You know, you're talking about $4,000, but again, I have to bring up what is going on in this country and in Oshkosh and in Winnebago County. And we have got a lot of death by suicide, a lot of death by overdoses. These people are busy. They're asking for a mere 2 hours more. What is the big deal? Just vote for it and get it over with. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Warnke. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go to a vote for the first amendment. We'll do this by a roll call vote. So vote aye if you approve of the amendment, which is to add $6,007 to the 2019 coroner's office budget for the purpose of increasing the administrative associate's hours from 28 to 30 hours per week. Vote nay if you don't. She's absent. And that motion carries 27 to 2 with 7 absent. So moving on down to the second amendment. and that is to add $320,000 to the Winnebago County Park capital outlay account from the Winnebago County undesignated fund account for the purpose of acquiring a 20-acre parcel of land adjoining the east boundary of the Sunnyview Exposition Center and East County Road Y. I'll call on Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for amendment number 2.
There's
And
a-
any questions? Rob's in the back of the room.
So there is a motion and a second. Discussion. I'll call on Supervisor Binder, followed by Supervisor Rasmussen.
Catherine couldn't make it this afternoon, she's got a meeting. I'll just give you an overview about the community gardens. We actually started looking for land for that probably about 9 months ago. The existing land that we had for the past 25 years, we rented from the DNR, and they put us on a 1-year notice. They are not gonna renew that next year. They currently rent out, I believe, 137 spots to community gardeners. We actually could rent out, it is designed for 160, but the spring was, there was a lot of low areas there that we didn't feel were adequate to plant, so we only actually sold 137. And what we're looking at doing is taking a part of that 20-acre parcel, and it's right across the street from the Coughlin Center, so it's like ideal for Kimberly to basically supervise that. And we would have the community gardens for this year in 2019, so you should actually have 1 year to basically set that garden up, to plot it out, to get it rototilled, and, you know, so that we could rent that in 2020. I just see it as an asset to the community, and it is called a community gardens, and I don't know why we wouldn't want to support this. And for the parks, it gives us one more access road to get into the park. When we start getting the events of 35,000, 40,000 people there, it's, you want to get them in and out as quick as possible, you know, and by having that extra entrance or exit, whatever Rob would make it, it just gives us one more avenue to get people in and out of the facility. So I urge you to support it, and I truly think like the community gardens is the way of the future. I mean, you see right now, all we build is apartment buildings. You see maybe 50 houses in Winnebago County, and you see 2-3 big apartment complexes every year go up. And these people have no place to garden, you know, so they look forward to after work, they had a hard day, they go out there and, you know, it's their way of relieving the stress. And like Kimberly said, we never had a community garden that was ours, so we couldn't put any benches out there, we couldn't plant any trees, because we never knew if they were gonna, we went on a 5-year lease, we never knew when they were gonna tell us that they wanted us to leave, and this happened to be the year. So I hope you all support it, and that we can keep the community gardens, as a lot of people look forward to having it every year.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker, Supervisor Rasmussen, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we bought 20 acres a few months ago. We had a presentation, we had a couple presentations, I believe, before we went ahead with that. And all of a sudden, we get this put on our laps last night. Until the young man with the family was here, most of us knew nothing about this. I'm just curious as to why it's all of a sudden here. Correct me if I'm wrong, is it because if it gets passed within the budget, it only has to pass with a majority vote? Otherwise, it takes a 2/3 vote, is that correct?
I see the Parks Director in the back. I'll give him an opportunity to speak.
That's correct, Vicky said already. So I've seen these come in before this way. I think that's circumventing the system. But back to the issue, when we had the conversation about the other 20 acres, I don't recall in that conversation anybody saying, oh, by the way, we're going to need to buy 20 more acres for $320,000 so we have access to it. Correct? Anybody hear that?
I can start addressing.
Well, no, it's all right. That's just a statement. Then I'm wondering, this family that came in, if this property is for sale, why aren't they just buying it? Why do they need to come to us? Have we already put money down on it? Or why are they holding it for us? There's got to be some story there, or some kind of eminent domain going on.
I'll give Director Roy an opportunity to speak, please.
Yeah, on that question, I don't know the intricacies behind it, but there is an offer to purchase in on it. I can't say that they have a formal offer in as well. I'm not sure what the background is on this, because it took me by surprise too. we only found out about a family's interest in it several weeks ago. We knew another party was out there, but then it came through that it was a family that was indeed, and apparently they have very keen interest, obviously, that with them showing up here. So until this point, yeah, we hadn't, I don't know of any other offer that's been put in except ours.
Well, evidently, they can't put in an offer. If we did, we must have money down on that, correct?
We don't, no. No, it's an offer to purchase. It simply is a statement, an agreement.
Right, but they're not holding property without money down.
Correct. They have accepted they've signed the offer to purchase. It's simply a form acknowledging that they are in receipt of the offer to purchase at this time. There's no money involved at this point. The offer is contingent and has it written in as a provision that it cannot go forward without county board approval.
That seems rather odd to me. My next question then would be, if you look to the property to the west of there, it's owned by the YMCA, if I read that right on the county's map there. If the main thing is for an entrance, you know, that piece of land right to the west of there, there's nothing being used there. They've got that, I'm not sure what goes on there now. I believe it was a tennis court. Is that still a tennis center there? Is there any contact with them that they would sell a strip of land along there for an entrance? It wouldn't be $320,000. You wouldn't deprive this family of their dream home that they'd like. It seems to me like that's something that should be pursued. I think this is, dumping this on us the night before and to vote on today is just really pushing it. And of course, we know the reason why, and I won't be supporting it for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Weiss.
I'd like to take on the same track as Supervisor Rasmussen. This doesn't smell that good. It could be that it's just coincidental that the property is available and we're available to make a buying decision. That's very, very plausible. But this certainly has not taken the path of prudent decision-making. Prudent decision-making is you come in to a special orders meeting and you present your concept to the board. That's what I have seen over the past 12 years and the way that this board has acted. There have been some bad decisions that have been made along the way, but most of the decisions, 98% of them have been good decisions that we live with and that our residents of Winnebago County live with. What I took away from this individual's presentation and from the handout that he presented to each of us is that he appears to be an entrepreneur, and that this piece of property in particular is valuable to him because it has access to the volumes of visitors and users of the parks and expo facilities. He wants to put a pumpkin patch in there where people can come and visit or pick pumpkins, or where he can turn this piece of land into an entrepreneurial venture. Now, the decision that this board needs to consider is, would you want for the county to rezone this property? Actually, it may be in the city, so you may not have any thing to say about it if in fact it is city property. But the point is that it appears to me that this individual is an entrepreneur. He seeks to maximize and take a risk of starting a business, incidentally with his family. And the question is, should we, as a county board, preempt a possible entrepreneur business at 770 County Road Y? I oppose this because it was given to us in a surprise, and I think it needs to go through the regular vetting process. So I will not be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Weiss, followed by Supervisor Warnke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to speak about the community garden. At Fox Crossing, where I'm from, my district is, we have community gardens. They became very important to a lot of people there, specifically the people living in apartments, elderly people that just don't have the land anymore, or people like myself that just live around a bunch of trees and can't get anything growing. So it has been very important. Having the fresh vegetables for the summer is fantastic. It's teaching a lot of the kids a lot of things about gardening, that they're out there helping moms and dads and everything else to do this. I think it's very important that we continue this, that we have a long-term solution for it, which is, and I'm very sorry to see that the DNR has done what they have, but we do need a long-term solution. We can't be moving these 137 people around from year to year. And so I'm in favor of this resolution, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Weiss. Next speaker is Supervisor Warnke, followed by Supervisor Powers.
Well, here we go back to the old history lesson again, and it concerns the racetrack. This county spent $1.5 million to build that racetrack for the enjoyment of the citizens of Winnebago County. There was a big push on to close it down because there was a conflict with the management. And it should have just left it alone and let the people have their racetrack. I went to a committee meeting and talked, and I went to the county board meeting and talked and said, if there's a problem with it, buy more land. But at that time, oh, no, we can't do that. We can't buy any more land. Well, this is the second one that's come in now. I mean, give me a break. $320,000. As far as the community gardens go, we have got an awful lot of room in that park somewhere else that we can put community gardens, and you know you can. If you go to the south end of that thing, there's a lot of open space. And if we got to close up a soccer field, that's the way it goes. We'll close up a soccer field and put community gardens in there. We do not need this land. I'm telling you that, and I did not vote for the other piece of land that you bought, and I keep hearing stories about all these concerts that you're gonna get, and you're gonna get $40,000 and $50,000, or 50,000 people there. It's not going to happen, I'm telling you that right now. And it just doesn't sound right what this is trying to do. So I ask you to vote this down.
Thank you, Supervisor Warnke. Next speaker, Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I'm planning on voting in favor of this. I like the idea of the community gardens. I have a friend who has an apartment out there. There are a lot of apartment buildings in that general vicinity, and a place for a community garden would be great. I was truly moved by the man who spoke and his family and his kids and the whole thing, but what I didn't hear is, has the house been inspected? Can they actually take possession of the house? Have they had the water and sewer checked? Can they actually, is that available to them? Have they been pre-qualified for a loan to buy that kind of stuff? I didn't hear any of that from them. They have a wonderful dream, and it sounds like it's something to be applauded and lauded, but at this point, it sounded only like a dream. There was nothing that gave me an indication that he was actually prepared to pay for and move into a house that Has it been inspected? I mean, I don't know those answers because he didn't give them to us. I felt like it was a wonderful dream, but that's all it was. Thank you.
Thank you Supervisor Powers. Next speaker Supervisor Wingren, followed by Supervisor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think dreams are good. I have a dream that this board is open, honest, and accountable. We're not here, not in this thing. This is a nightmare. Why can't we be open, honest, and accountable? I voted for the land purchase before, but we knew about it. It was presented. The facts were laid out. We were able to discuss it. Not, the night before we're told this. And all of a sudden, we're switching from buying some land that someone else wants for gardens. That was never discussed. Last night or until now, all of a sudden, we're talking about that. What about, is this land owned by the city? Would they be in charge of the zoning, or would we? We don't know the answers to that question. In short, this is a rush to judgment. This is not the way to do business, to keep our reputation here as being receptive and representative of the people. You can't make this stuff up as you go along. So I think this is really bad timing for this. Thank you.
Thank you Supervisor Wingren. Next speaker is Supervisor Smith, followed by Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at it from two directions. If we purchase that land, it comes off the tax roll. If the other people that want to invest in it to build up a business, it's on the tax rolls. And I'm in favor of making money for the county. I'll vote against this resolution.
Thank you Supervisor Smith. Next speaker is Supervisor Snyder, followed by Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've heard a lot of wisdom today, but to me, it just gets down to the fact that I look at these people as they're tending to their gardens out where they are now, and I know how passionate they are. I see gardens out along Highway 41, on the east side of Highway 41, just before you get to the airport. We're going to lose those. There may be some wisdom into saying we can possibly find room in a park. At what expense? That throws the soccer program into disarray. I really enjoyed that kid's presentation last night, but what I'm thinking of right now is we have 137 customers who currently have community gardens with up to 160 available. And when I see that and maintaining that program, I think I have to vote in favor of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you Supervisor Snyder. Next speaker, Supervisor Wojciechowski, followed by Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to support this resolution because I do like the idea of what it's trying to do. I do like the idea of a community garden and everything that comes with it. I just have to agree with Supervisor Wingren Rasmussen about, how this was presented and how, I know nothing about it. I just read it right now. But my question to Rob is, if we vote no on this, if it fails to pass, is there any chance that this could come back maybe next month or in the near future and we could vote on it after maybe getting a presentation or learning more information about it? Or if we vote no, is it just off the table?
That'll all depend on the purchaser. I'm taking it that the family's waiting in line to put forth an offer. I know the Netzer family is eager to have someone purchase the property, so that family is looking, I think, for the best offer, and if that is the family that was here last night, I think they'll probably go that route.
Thank you.
Thank you Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker, Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've looked at this several different ways already since last night. I agree with all of you. Rob, when you put in that offer to purchase, how long is it for? It should say on there how many days.
It's good till the date of closing is set for December 7th. That would expire that offer to purchase.
Okay.
But again, I want to point out it's contingent on county board approval, so literally when you vote, you will be turning it down or it'll carry through.
Well, you said till December 2nd, so you could still come in November.
That's the closing date.
You could still come in November and give us a presentation on this.
Just voting it down here means it doesn't go in the budget, it doesn't mean it's...
Right, this just means money.
Correct.
Well, it would
The
be
county
their
exec might
decision,
even
but
throw it
one of the
out.
provisions were, the provision was that if the county board turns it down, that they have their right to move ahead with a different purchase.
So in other words, it's today or not at all.
Not unless the Netzers were to amend that, the counter, or the offer.
Because
Be
usually it
willing
says
to.
on a purchase, offer to purchase, that usually gives you so many days to accept or reject it.
Right. But I'm unclear what was going to change
Well,
between now and
there's
then.
been questions asked already, if you can't come back and give a presentation on it. And this way, if you could, if it left the room in there, you could come back in November and give us a presentation. And
Yeah.
I think that's what everybody here seems like they really want, because it was kind of a surprise here to some of us that didn't know about it.
Sure. It's contingent on the Netzers and their willingness.
The second thing is, we seem to be talking an awful lot about community gardens. Hopefully, we're not buying this property just to put in community gardens, because there was 137, but we don't know if there's going to be 137 people that's going to sign up, because I've got people out by myself on 21, FF, there's community gardens all over. So let's not just say we're going to buy a piece of property for community gardens. I can think of, without considering the soccer field out there, where they could have community gardens if they wanted to out there. So if we're thinking about this, if we're going to do it, let's think about expansion onto the park and not just possibly adding community gardens, but not just that. But I don't know how we can do it, but I'd really like to have you find out, because I think you'd have a much better chance if you could give us a presentation on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker is Supervisor Lenz.
Thank you, Chairman. So just quick piece of clarification. Supervisor Egan had hit one of my few points. We do not have time for a presentation and a vote, is that correct?
Again, it'll be up to the Netzers. Now, if the county board turns this down, they have the rights to refuse the offer.
Okay.
That would be up to them. If they're willing to amend it, to extend it, then fine. But I can't speak for the Netzers.
Okay, so under our current agreement, we can't definitely say we have time. All right, so the other points I have, more on the, one personal thing is I do support offering land for community gardens. I think it's great for the community. I know some of those, the produce ends up at farmers markets, and it also gives people an opportunity for if they want to grow their own vegetables. I know that's a big movement around the area where people want to know where their food's coming from. But I do want to know one thing in regards to the person that came in and wants to make an offer on the land. Did they have that offer in at the time that we made our offer? I'm assuming not. I just want to know definitely.
Well, again, I know very little about the family. I think you know more than I do at this point. Okay. The real estate agent did not state that any offer, any formal offer had gone in besides ours.
Okay, so it's possible, likely that they made their offer after us.
Could be.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Lenz. Just a clarification, though, the reference was made to voting it up or down, but I would think with any resolution, there would be an opportunity for this board, and I'm not sure how you do it in an amendment version, to postpone a decision with a request that a presentation be placed on the November 20th county board, and that a resolution for approval of this to also be placed on the November 20th county board. I would think that a motion like that would be feasible in this scenario as well. So if the agreement only says voting up or down, then if that was the sort of decision that was made today, that wouldn't be voting it down. But Corporation Counsel, I don't know if you have any comments in that regards.
I agree. I think you can either vote it up or down today, or postpone it to the next board meeting to have a full presentation.
I just wanted to make that clarification based on at least the understanding of the agreement that understanding based on the comments today, and just I wanted clarification of that as well. that, then when it was on November 20th, it would be separate from the budget, absolutely. And that's why, in my view, it would have to be a motion specifically that you'd postpone this, and that specific motion to place it on the November 20th agenda. Yes?
I make a motion that we postpone this to the November board meeting.
And motion and second, and just to clarify, your intent was to place a presentation in regards to this property and a resolution about the affirmation or a no vote, correct? Right, okay. So there's a motion and a second, Corporation Counsel?
Just for clarification, though, I think everybody heard, it would require more than a majority. So today would be a majority, but if you push it off to November 20th or whenever the November meeting is, it's going to be, I'm not sure if it's 2/3 or 3/4, 2/3.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. I'm gonna, well, first, let me go in order here, so I'll call on Supervisor Binder.
Just for clarification, did you read the contract to purchase that land? Do they have to have a decision by the end of the day as far as if we're going to purchase it, or do we actually have till November? My interpretation of the contract was we had to give them a notification we were going to either accept the purchase price today or turn it down, and then it would go to the next family. But you must have read the contract, so can you tell us in your professional opinion, if we postpone this till November, that we'll still be able to follow through with the initial offer?
I would need to look at the actual contract, and maybe Mr. Way has it, but I can tell you, I received it at the last minute and was asked to look at it, and so I looked at it. But, Rob, do you have it in front of you?
Yeah.
Supervisor Binder, we'll give her a few minutes, and then I'll come back to you. We'll give another person an opportunity to speak, but once she has an answer, you'll be the next person up, okay? I'll call next on Supervisor Norton, and then it'll be Supervisor Warnke. I know you were waiting and the board was reset, so Supervisor Norton first, then followed by Supervisor Warnke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could someone please explain to me how this land purchase is different than the $500,000 land purchase that we made for the Aviation Industrial Park? Because when we did that, we put that in the budget approximately 6 years ago, and then, as if I recall, we had to have another vote after that, which I think 2/3. Please, someone explain to me why this is different than that particular purchase.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker is Supervisor Warnke.
Well, I have a question, and probably should get legal counsel in on this, and from my days as a Realtor, I remember that if you put an offer in, you had to have consideration in this offer, which means you have to have money in it. And what do you think about that, Tom? You were a Realtor, you should know.
Vice Chairman Egan?
Well, as a realtor, that was my interpretation too. You either had to have so much down, 10% or whatever,
Yes.
or that's
Well,
why I asked
any-
Rob
Any
also.
consideration.
That's why I also asked Rob, there should be like a day, you should have so many days or whatever in
Yes.
there for when you have for consideration.
Absolutely.
And I don't know when corporate counsel got it, but hopefully she had time to read it over beforehand.
Okay, so we'll move back to the Corporation Counsel, and afterwards, we'll give Supervisor Binder an opportunity to continue to speak.
So, looking at this and trying to refresh my recollection, it indicated in here that the offer would be binding upon the parties only if a copy of the accepted offer is delivered to the buyer on or before 8 a.m. on Tuesday, October 30th. It then went on to say, which is interesting, that this is the offer. This is not this is the offer, okay? And then it goes on, as I'm quickly looking at this, there's a clause, because this is a standard contract and it has time of the essence, but it's struck. The language of time of the essence is struck. But then it does say, under additional provisional contingency, should this offer be accepted, said acceptance shall be contingent upon passage of a resolution by the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors and approval by the Winnebago County Executive approving purchase of this property and appropriating funds for said purpose. So looking at this, it basically says that the offer, and again, there's no reference when it talks about the purchase price of $320,000 in terms of earnest money. There was no earnest money accompanied. It says not applicable. And so the offer to purchase had to have been provided by this morning, but again, as Mr. Wade pointed out, it was obviously contingent upon Board of Supervisors passing a resolution to that effect.
Thank you. We'll go back to Supervisor Binder.
I guess I'd urge my fellow county board members to turn the amendment down. We're not trying to circumvent anything here. It happened to come up that we had the opportunity to get this land. There are other people besides that young couple that are interested in that parcel. There's an investment company that's looking into it, perhaps to build apartment buildings. There are 9 other farmettes available on the county, in Winnebago County, that family could have opportunity to buy, but there's only one available by the Expo Center that we have the opportunity to buy. You know, if we don't look forward to having that land for future growth, you look at Bay Beach, where would they have been if they would have just basically would have said, well, we're not going to buy that extra land. When they wanted to build the roller coaster, they had the land for it. You know, if we don't look down towards the future, what are we going to have to give to our children? You know, if Oshkosh wouldn't have the golf course, we may not have Oshkosh Truck today. You know, so it's not like, you know, you're looking at spending $320,000. Yeah, the land may not have a good purpose for another 10 years, but the land is there. There's not going to be, you know, it also can be converted to residential. It could make 40 residential lots on that partial. And it is right now in the town of Oshkosh, but you can get it zoned to the city of Oshkosh. The water and sewer is already out there. So it's possible you could buy that as an investor and create a 40 lot industrial or residential development there. You know, and here we got these pyrotechs coming in 2020. They're going to shoot fireworks off for 3 days. Could you imagine a family of 6 trying to put your children to bed at 8 o'clock and they're going to shoot fireworks for another 2.5 hours? I mean, I just think it's the way to get the land when it's available. You know, this family's owned this land since the 60s. We looked at the land on 76. They wanted $1,700,000 for that farm. So I just think we should basically have the opportunity. We should follow through and buy it.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. And just so everyone's on the same page, we are on the postponement to the November 20th meeting. So all further discussion until voted up or down should be on the motion to postpone. I'll call on Supervisor Konecki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had, somehow my notice to speak fell off. I was on here earlier. This property is so close, right next to what we have now. It's perfect location for the county to purchase this in one way or the other. The family, I hate to say it this harshly, they can possibly find another spot for their garden and possibly not too far away from the county land and still have their garden in a profitable, make a profit for them. But I think we should get this property before it disappears. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Konecki. Next speaker is Supervisor Rasmussen, followed by Supervisor Joyce.
I'll say again, this was given, we didn't even know about this until this family came yesterday to talk. And now we find out that our corporation counsel didn't even have it early enough that she's got to sit up here and read it. This is really getting the cart ahead of the horse. Please vote to postpone this.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker is Supervisor Joyce, followed by Supervisor Finch.
Just a clarification from Corporation Counsel. The county board has to pass
a separate resolution authorizing the purchase of this, which we could not do until our November 20th meeting anyway, correct?
That's correct.
Correct. So therefore, I would ask everyone to support the motion to postpone.
Thank you, Supervisor Joyce. Next speaker is Supervisor Finch, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I disagree. I feel this is to the benefit of Winnebago County. It's to the benefit of the people who utilize the parks of Winnebago County. It's benefit also to Sunnyview Expo Center. I mean, this, I see nothing but benefits. Yes, there are some people who live nearby which could be upset. But the park was here long before they moved in. Now, I feel this is something that's going to be good for Winnebago County, and that's why I'm hoping that I can get at least 19 votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Shorsey.
In the first instance, I support postponing this to give us a chance to think about it and act if needed. The other question I ask is, in the verbiage in the be it resolved paragraph, does that imply that we were going to borrow that money if it's going to the capital account? If we're putting this in the budget, don't you have to get that money from someplace? And I don't understand from the resolution where that $320,000 is going to come from.
I'll call on the Finance Director to answer that question for you.
We would take that directly out of the undesignated general fund balance because I've used up all the levy. And this was new to me.
But it doesn't say that in here.
It should say that near the end?
It does on lines 30 and 31. The very
Yes.
last line.
It says that it's going to
Okay.
reduce the general fund undesignated fund balance.
Okay, well, I'm satisfied on that resolve, but I'm not satisfied in going ahead at this time.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Lenz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do support delaying the decision on this, but it's making me crazy because of the way this has proceeded, and it kind of goes back to not having a master plan for that Sunnyview area. But what's really bothering me is that when we were talking about purchasing the smaller piece of property, that if this property was in the minds of, parks leaders, whatever, that it did not get addressed at that time. And I realize it may not have been available. I recall some discussion about it, possibly down the line type of thing. But I'm very upset about the process that's happening here. And then, so I do think we need to delay it and have proper discussion about it. One positive thing, though, about acquiring all of that land is that the land in that area is very valuable. So we are surrounded by valuable land. If we make a mistake or we don't need that land because of the decisions we make, we can sell it at a later date. But a couple of people should be taken to the woodshed on this one in terms of how this is played out. It's very poor.
I'm going to give an opportunity for these other two people to speak. We'll call on Supervisor Lenz, followed by Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick thing. If we do not vote to postpone and we go forward with the vote, is it just to transfer just to approve the budget part of it and we still need to vote to approve the purchase? Or does that mean that we approve the budget piece and the purchase of it?
I believe, based on the past, that would approve the funding, but not the final purchase. I'm getting nods from the Corporation Council in regards to that.
Okay, thank you.
would defer to what Mr. Way said. I guess it depends on if the Nexers are willing to wait. I can't guarantee that you're going to be able to purchase it. I don't think anybody can. Other than the Nexers, perhaps.
Right, if we approve this tonight, we basically can purchase it. I'm just saying if we lay it over, then that land may not be available to us or go to the next person in line.
Yeah, because
That's all I'm asking you, so that the board knows that if we turn
under
it
the
down.
additional provisions, they talk about seller warrants that it has publicly listed this property for sale.
Okay. All right. So Supervisor Lenz, you finished speaking?
Well, I guess, now I'm confused. I thought, so if we approve the budget part, that doesn't mean we can go ahead and purchase. We still have another vote to purchase, correct?
As my understanding is, you approve the funding, but there still has to be a resolution to make a final purchase in something such as this. That's been the process we followed in the past.
So whether
Yes.
we agree to postpone it or not, we still have that final vote in November.
That would be correct.
Okay, thank you.
Next speaker is Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Many of my points were already covered, and this is difficult because of kind of the place that we're at. And my concern is too that if we don't pass this, we could lose the opportunity of purchasing it. But kind of one of my questions is, I know we talked about this earlier about even if we approve this, the county executive doesn't necessarily have to spend that money. Does that apply to this part? Because the way I look at it is, going forward, purchasing it and having a presentation prior to the final resolution, and if we decide to vote down that resolution, that money would probably just go back to the undesignated fund if we don't purchase that land. So I think, just hearing the discussion, it seems, just to secure the area, to approve the money now, and if we decide after a presentation in November that, or whatever more information we receive, we decide this isn't a good idea, we can vote down the resolution and just send that money back to the undesignated fund. But I would think approving it now, just to have that plot of land secured, is a good idea than waiting and see what happens until November.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker, Supervisor Locke, and it's on the motion to postpone.
Postpone it.
Thank you, Supervisor Locke. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari, and it would be on the motion to postpone.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it is. Let me offer this analogy. If I'm the owner of that property, and I'm sitting for this county board to take an action, watching this on TV, right? And I got another offer from a gentleman for $310,000 on the table, and we're saying, oh, we got to sit on this for a month. And by the way, the vote increases from majority to 2/3, enhancing the risk of not passing. Why wouldn't I sell it to the guy over here with $310,000 in his pocket right now? Right? So I urge you to pass this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Please.
I do have a question, and Doug, the Assistant Finance Director, brought it up to me as well, but we're trying to put this through in a 2019 budget, but I'm hearing that we're going to spend the money this year yet. So this is really a budget transfer. So it is something separate. If we're not spending this in 2019 and we're spending it in 2018, after thinking through this, this seems mute. Yeah. So just to bring that little
It's a valid point that you bring it up.
Okay. After we're sitting there thinking about it, and thank you, Doug.
So the motion is to postpone and to place a presentation and a resolution on the November 20th County Board agenda. So that's the motion you're voting on. Vote aye if you want to postpone and place it on the November 20th agenda. Vote no if you don't. And that motion passes 16 to 14 with 6 absent, and that is because it's the majority of those present. So that motion passes, so we will place a resolution on the November 20th agenda with a presentation from the Parks Director during that same meeting.
And if it's just a normal resolution, I believe it would have to go through committees as well, PNF and so forth. So just to put that in there as well. Okay, just want to let you. If it's going to be a normal resolution for 2018 spending, we need it to go through the Parks Committee and PNF Committee to approve the spending as well.
Please, Supervisor Fari.
If I might be recognized, you are saying November 20th, that's our next board meeting?
Yes.
That is the week of deer hunting. Just so you know.
Thank you, Supervisor
Do you
Fari.
think everybody's going to be here? Probably not.
Okay, so that motion is postponed, so we're on to Amendment 3. And Amendment 3 is to add $45,000 to the 2019 miscellaneous and unclassified budget as a grant to Reach Counseling Services. I'll call on Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to approve amendment number 3.
There's a motion and a second. You wish to speak? Please go ahead.
I bring forth this amendment because Angela Schmidt, who's the Associate Director for Reach Counseling Service, came to our Human Service budget hearing and meeting in June to make a one-time grant of $45,000 to eliminate the waiting list for the people who Winnebago County refers to them in cases, referred cases to them. She also, at the same time, after I talked to her after that, invited me to, because I was going to tell her I was going to make an amendment to this county board budget session, she invited me to talk with Lynn Byer, the director, we all met the director last night, and tour their facilities, which I did, and I guess I'm glad I did, because not only did I find out there was a very big waiting list for the needs for the services, I find out that Reach Counselor Service is involved with a program with our DA, a diversion program with those who are in sex trafficking. I also found later from Lynn Byer that while it's not in their contract with Winnebago County, and Winnebago County doesn't handle, they get a lot of referrals to try to treat and help the people who are the sexual offenders themselves. And the one thing that drove me to even make this amendment more and push for this one-time $45,000 grant is, last week I attended my first Take Back the Night event, which is an event that Christian Ant Center and Reach Services have every year. And I found out not only from the survivor that people who suffer from sexual abuse and sexual violence can be anyone, the person who their survivor was a engineer, but also found that in the last couple of years, the people who have needed their services, both Christian Ant Center and Reach Counseling Service, have doubled and tripled because of the Me Too movement. And I just think that this $45,000 is a very good one-time grant to an agency who has the experience, who handles the most difficult of cases, and can help these people with therapy and advocacy and everything. And that's why I asked you for this. I also will add that, others, I asked other supervisors I asked to support me in this. One was Supervisor Hogan, who couldn't be here today, but as you know, he's a defense attorney. He said they are a great asset. So I think this one-time grant of $45,000 to Reach Services is much, much needed, and that's why it should be done. And we heard the county executive say that in the future we may have to find other ways to help perform the service to do. Well, we have the people who need counseling and therapy who've had sexual abuse or sexual violence or offenders or sex trafficking. We have a perfect one. I think we should give it to Reach Counseling Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker is Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a member, along with Supervisor Norton, on the Human Services Board, and I know he feels passionate about this. However, I'm voting against this. Reach already receives $25,000 a year from the county, and to the best of my knowledge, they have never given an accounting of how they spend the taxpayers' $25,000 every year. I was present when Reach made their presentation to us in June, And I was also present at the October Human Services Board meeting when Dr. Topol expressed some concern because he had heard about the possibility of this amendment coming forward. There's no waiting list or no waiting line to see a counselor at Human Services. We have appointment times available daily. There's no need for the county to fund a duplicate service to a private vendor when the county already provides this service, and there is no wait for this. If Reach Services is having to put people on a waiting list, then that's their issue, and I don't think it's the county's issue. And I urge you to vote against this amendment. Reach could go other places for a one-time grant, like to the Lilly Foundation or the Pew Family Foundation. There are other places they could go to get money, but I don't see the county has any business providing this to a private vendor. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker is Supervisor Buck, followed by Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to speak on just an experience that I had with Reach Counseling a week ago. They came in and talked to my daughter's kindergarten class, and just the work that they do. They go into all the kindergartens. I don't know where else they go, what other grades or whatnot, but informed in there that 2 out of 5 kindergartners in Winnebago County are victims of sexual abuse, and I think that's extremely disturbing, and I think we need to do what we can to fund them and help these folks out. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Next speaker is Supervisor Rasmussen, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for Vicky on this. It says it's to add it to the miscellaneous and unclassified budget, which means it'll be a levy item, but you said earlier we're maxed out on our levy right now, right?
There's a miscellaneous and classified department. It would go in that department, but if you read further under be it further resolved, it would be a reduction to the general fund on designated balance.
So, okay, I thought that contradicted itself, but it doesn't.
Yeah, well, it's called, there's an unclassified fund, but it should maybe have not said fund, but department, so that, it really should just say department.
So I was correct that we are at our levy limit.
We're at our levy limit, and it would come out of the.
So any of these that come in for, to go in the budget needs to have a reduction somewhere.
Right, and it would be reduced, as it says on line 19 and 20 from the undesignated general fund balance, but as part of the miscellaneous and unclassified department.
Good point. Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Lenz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't push my button. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Supervisor Lenz, followed by Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question. Are we sending recommendations for people to go to Reach? And is that adding to their backlog, we as a county? The other question I have is there any level of information that we can tie to this one-time grant that would allow them to send us in some accountability? Obviously, we don't want personal names or anything, but maybe head counts or whatever else they'd be willing to share. So 2 questions is there any way we can address the question about accountability? And are we adding to their backlog as a county?
I'm going to give
Don't we have that
Supervisor Norton an opportunity to answer that question.
Lynn Byer told me that a couple of weeks ago when I talked about this amendment that she was contacted from someone from Human Services about how many cases that Winnebago County had sent to them, and the number that Lynn Byer gave me was 41. Now that's completed cases. That's not. These are very complicated cases. These cases can take long periods of time, and that's what Lynn wanted to make sure that you all know. She said there's a backlog or a waiting list of 32 more, and it's very, very constant. I defeat what my fellow Supervisor Karen Powers said because it is much needed. It's much needed because as of late as yesterday, Bill Topol was willing to put 10,000 more down to help take care of this wait list, and I don't think that's. I think that's small. I think we have $45,000 in the general fund. I think a one-time grant to help take care of the waiting list and other things that reach counselor services for this county is needed, and that's why I approve of it. And to even more direct answer to you, Supervisor Lenz, if we approve of this, I will definitely confer that message to Lynn Byer. She couldn't be here today. She had to go to another meeting. And if we want more evidence about how many cases, it looks like we're going to have to anyways for the $25,000 we do give them. So I think that's going to be very much forthcoming in the near future. So I do urge you, please support this.
Thank you.
Thank you Supervisor Lenz, and thank you for the response Supervisor Norton. Next speaker is Supervisor Defferting, followed by Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that what Reach Counseling does is amazing and wonderful, and I fully support their causes. You know, usually, you know, come Christmas time, I kind of go through a list of nonprofits that I'm able to donate to, and they're definitely high up on my list every year, and I plan to donate to them this upcoming December. But I don't think that this is something that should be funded by taxes. Simply put, I think that this is something that we can do voluntarily as a community, and urging people to support Reach Counseling. And you know, that's something that we can do as county board people, influence people to make a donation to Reach Counseling. They are a 501c nonprofit organization, and they are looking for people. They're looking for donors, and I think that that's our job, is to urge them to donate. We have a little over 250,000 people living in Winnebago County. Just imagine if everyone gave $5 to Reach Counseling. How much more money would they have? They don't need a one-time grant of $45,000. I think that we can do this just by urging people to support them voluntarily through their own donations. Thank you.
Thank you Supervisor Defferting. Next speaker is Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the clerk is working on my concern. I notice on the screen it says we're discussing amendment number 8. And I know, Sue, you're working on it, but just for clarity and making sure that we don't have a permanent incorrect record, we should somehow get that back to 03. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks for the clarification. Next speaker is Supervisor Spellman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a survivor of sexual assault, I'm eternally grateful for Reach Counseling and the services that they provide. I was connected with a victim advocate who helped me through the legal process that lasted almost a year, including a jury trial and sentencing. I think that we should be assisting survivors in this community to receive assistance from trained professionals that our county may not have available.
If you could please be quiet and allow her the opportunity to speak.
So I would urge you to support this. I think that we are in the position to support this not-for-profit organization, and that it's a really good cause, and it's a one-time only transfer. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Spellman. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through our illustrious iPads, I've accessed the Human Services Department budget. And having gone through that before, I know that there are approximately 150 vendor line items in which this county is spending upwards of, it's got to be $6, $7, $8 million to contractors, to social agencies, to psychological nonprofit organizations. And I would think that if Reach Counseling wanted money from the county, they ought to have gone through Human Services and become one of those 150 vendors to whom we are already spending money with. And for that reason, and because of Supervisor Powers' very clear-cut explanation of her experience as a member of the Human Services Board with unfavorable recommendations from the director of the Human Services Department, I will oppose this resolution amendment. Budget amendment.
Thank you Supervisor Eisen. Seeing no other lights, we'll go ahead and vote. We'll do a roll call vote. Vote aye if you approve of the $45,000 to the 2019 miscellaneous and unclassified budget as a grant to Reach Counseling Services. Vote no if you don't. This is amendment number 3. And that motion fails 12 to 17 with 1 abstention. So that moves us to Amendment 4. Amendment 4 is add $8,000 to the 2019 Airport Department's budget for the purpose of repairing cracked ceiling pavement. I'll call on Supervisor Warnke.
I ask for your approval of Resolution 078-102018. Jim Shell is the director of the aviation, or the airport, is in back, so he would be very eager to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Supervisor Warnke. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll do it by a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we're moving on down then to amendment number 5. Add $500 to the 2019 Airport Department's budget for the purpose of providing additional staff training. I'll call on Supervisor Warnke.
I ask for your approval of 078-102018. Again.
Second.
Okay.
There is a motion and a second. Discussion. I'll call on Supervisor Schneider.
Just a clarification, please. On the number page, it says $500, and on the actual resolution, number 78, it says $550, so.
I'll call on the airport director.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the question. The proposal via the budget amendment is for an additional $550 in the line item, which is 51701-52001. So it's the ask is to increase that line item by 550 total.
Thank you. So we'll do that as a correction, Supervisor Warnke. Is that okay? And that's okay with the second? Okay. Supervisor Singstock, did you have a question?
I was going to make the same comment as Supervisor Snyder.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll do this by a voice vote. Once again, this is Amendment 5 to add $550 to the 2019 Airport Department's budget. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we are on to Amendment number 6. Add $5,300 to the 2019 Airport Department's budget for the purpose of replacing the fire alarm control panel. I'll call on Supervisor Warnke.
I ask for your approval of 078-102018.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. Seeing no discussion, once again do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We're moving on down to Amendment 7. Add $10,000 to the 2019 miscellaneous and unclassified budget for the purpose of increasing the County Fair Association's budget. I'll call on Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the approval of resolution number 078-102018.
There's a motion and a second. And Vice Chairman Egan will provide a little background. Please, go ahead.
The reason I'm asking for this $10,000, I said I'd never do this while I was on the fair board, but anyways, years ago, we used to get 60,000 when we moved out there, and for some unforeseen reason, they must have thought the Fair Association was rich, and they took 10,000 away from us, and they never gave it back. But since then, the parks took over more or less, and we always used to get sponsorships from the Pepsi. We do not get that anymore. We do not get any sponsorships from AT&M. The parks took that over. This year, we had to go ahead and we had to get the track ready for everything. We had to take the chips off and everything. We had to get that ready. So there was a lot of extra work on that. There's new people. I will tell you, there's 3 veterans that are going off from there. Between the 3 of them, they put in $50,000 just to make the fair go this year. So with the new ones coming in on that, they surely can use this, and I'm sure a lot more, but I didn't want to ask for any more. So that's why I'm asked for the $10,000. I would surely hope that you would support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Any discussion? Okay, we'll do that by a voice. Oh, Supervisor Norton.
You know, I signed to amend it to Tom be a sponsor, but let me ask you, do you plan to have this permanently 60,000 from here until going forward, or just the 1 year? And let me ask you that.
As of right now, I'm only asking for this year. I cannot tell you what will happen next year.
Okay.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll do this by a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on down to amendment number 8. So these are the additional sheets that you would have received in the last half hour. So there's amendments 8, 9, and 10 that we're working towards right now. So amendment 8 is to add $54,312 to the 2019 Veteran Services budget for the purpose of allowing a full-time benefits specialist position to begin prior to the budgeted October 1, 2019 date. I'll call on Supervisor Snyder.
I move for resolution number 078-102018.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not questioning this as a veteran myself, but as I'm looking through these 3, they're all about adding employees, and again, we're out of levy. I'm just questioning the wisdom of adding employees out of our general fund and how that affects that general fund, because this would be in perpetuity, right?
I'll call on the Finance Director.
That's correct. We will have to sustain that. We had already added this position, but starting later on, so we were going to have to sustain it in the 2020 budget, which will cause us restraints and having to apply possibly general fund balance again next year.
It just seems like when these things come in, there needs to be a reduction somewhere. That should be part of this. What do you propose to reduce so that we can do this? We're out of levy.
Thank you,
Again, I'm not against this. You know, it's just trying to find the right place for it.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. I'll call on Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand that, but as Vicki just said, we were authorized this to begin on October 1st anyway. And as we all know, the return on investment we get for veteran services far outweighs in my estimation, the amount we spend on them. I understand the effect on the levy going forward, but I was just thinking that the quicker we can get this person on board, the more money we can get back into the Winnebago County, and the more veterans we can help. Probably the most important thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Seeing no other discussion, we'll do this by voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Opposed, there's 1 no. So that motion carries. So moving on down to amendment number 9. Transfer $17,940 from the temporary employees account to multiple wage accounts in the 2019 Public Health Department budget for the purpose of increasing 1 public health nurse position budgeted for a 0.8 FTE position to a 1.0 FTE position. I'll call on Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Make a motion to approve amendment number 9.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion.
I'll just be very basic,
Please.
brief. I talked about this last night. It's budget neutral, and that we're just transferring $17,000 or so, $18,000 approximately from the temporary employees account. So there's no impact on the levy or even on the general fund. If you have any questions, Doug Gearing's in the back.
Any questions, discussion? And we'll do it by voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes with 2 no votes. So moving on down to amendment number 10. This is the final amendment. Convert one part-time health educator project position to a part-time health educator regular employee status position. I'll call on Supervisor Norton.
I'll make a motion to approve amendment number 10.
There's a motion and there's a second.
Again, last night we talked about it, informed you about it. Any questions? Ask Doug, especially more on this one.
I'll call on Supervisor Farley, followed by Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any cost involved with this?
My understanding is it's
You're changing the
budget,
position, the exact same cost?
yeah, my understanding is it's budget neutral, but we do have the health director, so I'll ask him to respond. Director Gearin?
Thank you. We currently have an employee as a project employee. HR rules require that an employee not be a project employee any longer than 2 years. We have this position in the budget and have funding for it. So there really is no increase in cost. It's we're just trying to follow the rules of the HR department, because the project position would expire about mid-year, and that person could no longer work unless we converted it to a regular employee.
So I interpret that to mean is that you have a good employee doing a good job. By the rules, she's terminated, and you want to continue that person's employment.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Farley, and I'm going to call on the finance director to add to that.
I have a question for you. The resolution before was for $17,000. We were going to be taking that out of temporary employees. You have $20,000 in the budget for that. So what's this last amendment supposed to take out of that? Because it said it was coming from temporary.
This employee is already on the labor table and in the budget for 2019?
So they're not in temporary wages at all?
No.
Okay, that was,
They're a project employees, so they're on the regular wage table.
okay, it's okay. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification. Next speaker is Supervisor Rasmussen, followed by Supervisor Lenz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm questioning process here. We have a budget process that department heads present their budgets to the county exec. They sit down, they talk about them. I don't understand why these things are not part of that process, why we're getting them as amendments. And then, if I'm hearing this right, this is an employee that we already have in a position, and you want to hire this employee for a position that we have, correct? Why is that having to come to the county board? That's just a hiring process. Or did I miss something there?
Director Gearin's in the back.
Thank you, Supervisor. This is in effect a table of organization change. We have the status of project employees to allow flexibility in hiring staff for short-term projects. In this case, we have continued funding for the work that this individual is engaged in, and we're reaching that 2-year limit that we're allowed to do that. And I think these rules are in place, one, in part to allow departments flexibility in making hiring for short-term projects fairly easy, but also to protect employees that have been employed for 2 years to assure that we're not considering them for a regular position.
I don't think that answered my question. We're creating a position, and if we're creating a position, how can it be $0?
So the position is currently budgeted as a project employee, and project employees are paid benefits.
Okay, okay, I got that part.
And the project employee is not on the table of organization. a regular position is on the table of organization. So that change in the table of organization is what is being approved here.
Okay, because when we get these grants and projects and things at P&F meeting, we always question what's going to happen to these employees. We bring them in with some kind of funding, and then all of a sudden, they're part of our full-time staff, creating positions for them. I'm just saying, we always question that, so, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker is Supervisor Lenz.
Thank you, Chairman. Two questions. First, we knew this person was coming up near date. Is there a reason we didn't, and I don't know if it's procedure, but is there a reason we didn't identify that we wanted this move earlier?
Yeah, it was purely an oversight on my part, not realizing that the 2-year period was going to expire during the 2019 budget. Once I realized that in reviewing the materials, the time, I couldn't include it in the budget as a TO change any longer. I had to bring it in as an amendment.
Thank you. And then the second thing is, so if we change this position, does that eliminate the project employee, or does that give us a window to bring somebody else in?
No, the project employee status would expire, and if for some reason we needed a project employee in the future, then we would go through the process of initiating that with the Human Resources Department.
Thank you.
Please, Madam Instructor.
And we just need some words amended. I don't know if I can, am I allowed to put those words forward, or it's just on the bottom?
Okay, and so this amendment is because it's budget neutral, whereas there was boxes that said increase or decrease. So the wording change would be in line 22, 23, 24, and 25. I'll read it. So be it further resolved by the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors that such expense, that remains the same, but you would remove all those boxes. You would remove the verbiage in regards to Public Health Department's wages, temporary employees account on page 319 of the 2019 Winnebago County General Budget. You remove all of that and simply replace it with, say, has no effect on the budget. So the be it further resolved would state as follows. Be it further resolved by the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors that such expense has no effect on the budget. This is a budget neutral request. Okay? So we need that in a form. Okay? There's a motion and a second to make that amendment. So we need to vote on that first. All right? So for that amendment verbiage change between lines 22 through 25, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries with one no vote. That was Supervisor Lautenschlag. Okay, so we are now back on the main motion as amended. Supervisor Lenz, did you have further comments, or were you not calling in? Okay. All right, so we are on the main motion as amended. So it would be to convert one part-time health educator project position to a part-time health educator regular employee status position, budget neutral. Okay? All those in, we'll do a voice vote on this. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? With 2 noes, that passes. Okay, so that completes all 10 of our amendments to the budget. So now the only motion left would be to vote on the budget as amended. But before we go and do that, any other comments on anything in regards to the budget? Otherwise, we'll move towards a vote.
One last one.
The finance director has some comments.
I just
Please.
wanted to let you know I added up the amendments, and we're going to be taking an additional $82,169 out of the general fund balance with the amendments as voted in. $82,169 additional dollars being applied.
Okay. All right, and so there has been a motion and a second already on the floor, actually, when we brought it to the floor. So now we simply need to vote on that budget as amended. Okay? So we will move to a roll call vote. Point of clarification, please, Supervisor Wojciechowski.
About the undesignated, how much money we were total?
So I added up all of the amendments that it got approved, and it was $82,169. Additional to, if you look on page 24 of your budget books, I had already applied $2,675,000 of the general fund just to get into levy. I'll add that 82,000 to that number.
Thank you.
All right?
Okay. And just before we go to that final vote, I want to make sure I was correct on not needing a motion in a second, because we brought that to the floor last night. Am I accurate on that, Corporation Counsel? Okay, so, very good. Okay. All right, so we are on a vote to pass the budget as amended, okay? So vote aye if you vote to pass the budget as amended, vote no if you don't. And that motion passes 29-1. So we have an adopted budget for 2019. So I just want to thank you all for the process. I thought it all went quite well. I want to thank the departments and the staff who presented for all their efforts in this budget. I do want to thank the finance director for all her efforts on the budget, the county executive, and certainly the clerk's office with all the work they put into it. The Corporation Counsel as well for her guidance with a number of those questions. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I'd call on Supervisor Albrecht.
I move to adjourn.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.